is Jeff Robinson, and this is the final video of a series of videos based on my book, Saved by Grace Through Faith or Saved by Decree, which is a biblical and theological critique of Calvinism. In this final video, I want to talk about what is in fact the final concluding chapter of my book, which deals with a variety of problems associated with Calvinism. Most of these problems arise from the fundamental belief that God, through his decree, which was created before the foundation of the world, before the earth was made, through his decree determines everything that happens. In my book I list 8 problems, but here we'll just discuss very briefly 3 of them. First, the problem of excessive appeals to mystery or paradox, a very common Calvinistic trait. Second, the problem of the livability of Calvinism. By that I mean, can the formal beliefs of Calvinism be actually lived out in daily practice? And then third and finally, the problem of the character of God portrayed by Calvinism. Let's look first of all then at the problem of excessive appeals to mystery or paradox. I'll give 2 examples from my book. Here's a quote from my book concerning the first example. An appeal to mystery is seen, for example, in Grudem's attempt to explain 2 contradictory situations. God determining all things, and yet with real human choices and decisions being made. Here's a quote from Grudem in his Systematic Theology. God causes all things that happen, says Grudem, but he does so in such a way that he somehow, note the word somehow, upholds our ability to make willing, responsible choices. Exactly how God combines his providential control with our willing and significant choices, Scripture does not explain to us. Here the circle has been squared, but in a mysterious and unknowable manner. Calvinism just can't get away from the appeal to mystery to deal with what are in fact contradictions. Yes, Scripture does indeed teach that God is able, especially when at key junctures of redemptive history, not necessarily for everything, but at key points in redemptive history, God is able to use the wickedness of men or the decisions of men to further his redemptive purposes for the salvation of the world. But Grudem here, like all Calvinists, says something more. He's saying that God decrees everything to the minutest detail. What toothpaste I use to clean my teeth, what cereal I have in the mornings, and so on, the minutest degree, and yet I am making significant choices and decisions. These two facts, or these 2 assertions, are actually contradictory as far as I'm concerned. Here's another example concerning faith and the gift of faith. After stating that faith is the special gift of God, John Calvin, goes on to say, quote, "It seems to some paradoxical when it is said that none can believe Christ save those to whom it is given, the gift of faith." Calvin attributes the perception of a paradox here to people's failure to appreciate how, quote, "sublime heavenly wisdom is in discerning divine mysteries." There's the appeal to mysteries. Again, appeal to both paradox and mystery is made in order to explain away a doctrine not taught in Scripture, that is, that faith is a gift of God. Here's another problem, the problem of the livability of Calvinism. By the problem of the livability of Calvinism, I mean the problem of a Christian living consistently with his or her Calvinistic beliefs. Again, I'll illustrate this with two examples taken from my book. The first concerns a scenario, these are made up, scenarios of spousal abuse. Suppose a church member confides in her pastor that she is being abused by her husband. This is what a consistent Calvinist should say in response. "It's hard, Mary, but just hang in there. You can take comfort knowing that your abuse has been decreed by God. and that for reasons unknown to us but known to God, he desires that you experience beatings, verbal abuse and shame. It's all for his glory. Now, of course, no Calvinistic pastor would say such a thing, but by refusing to be honest and state clearly what his formal beliefs ought to be telling him and telling her, he's just illustrating the fact that, or demonstrating the fact that he can't actually live with his formal Calvinistic beliefs. Here's another scenario made up concerning the news of a fatal disease. Suppose a young couple have recently received news from their doctor that their 8-month-old son has just been diagnosed with a fatal disease and has just weeks to live. The distraught parents are seeking help and counsel from their Calvinistic pastor. They ask, "Pastor, will our child go to be with the Lord when he dies?" What does our consistent pastor say? "I'm sorry, but because of Adam's sin, your child is heading for hell. He may appear cute, but in reality, as far as God is concerned, he's a viper in a diaper, or as Calvin would say, he's doomed from the womb. Your only hope is that God has chosen him for salvation before the foundation of the world, that he is one of the elect. The only problem is that it's impossible to know the answer to that question because God hasn't told us who the elect are." I doubt if any Calvinistic pastor would say such a thing, again demonstrating the unlivability of his formal beliefs. In both these scenarios, it would be the rare Calvinist who would respond in the manner indicated. But this merely underscores the fact that it is hard, if not impossible, to live consistently with one's Calvinistic beliefs. Third and finally, the problem of the character of God portrayed by Calvinism. In the pages of Scripture, we see a certain portrayal of the kind of God revealed in its pages. God is just. He deals impartially with everyone. And yet Calvinism has God being very partial in favour of his elect. God is righteous in the pages of Scripture. All his dealings are right and righteous. But Calvinism has God decreeing everything, including every evil imaginable. God seeks to enter into relationship with all people, and yet Calvinism has God consigning to hell everyone apart from a few chosen for salvation. God is love. Calvinism portrays God as hating all people except the few he saves. Here's an extended quote from my book on this issue of God's character. Perhaps the most serious complaint one may level against Calvinism concerns its portrayal of God himself. Biblical revelation clearly shows God to be loving, gracious, personal, responsive, caring, just, impartial, desiring life for everyone, and a hater of sin. Unfortunately, Calvinism in nearly every case projects a God who contradicts these characteristics. God's love is selective. God's salvific grace is either completely lacking for the non-elect or irresistible in the case of the elect. And God's transcendence is so amplified with its distorted view of divine sovereignty, worked out through a comprehensive impersonal decree, that there is little room for genuine interaction between persons and God. Where God requires believers to love their enemies, God is permitted to be a hater of his enemies. Where the Bible requires Jesus' followers to be impartial in their dealings with men, God instead is demonstrably partial in his unilaterally and unconditionally selecting some for salvation while damning the rest to hell. It's the end of the quote from my book. So, by way of conclusion then, Calvinism, with its exaggerated and unbiblical view of God's sovereignty, expressed in a comprehensive, fine-grained decree that determines everything that happens, does not accurately express the biblical way of salvation. In Calvinism, in the final analysis, it must be admitted that salvation is by decree. All else within this system is secondary and a means to an end, the end being the working out of God's decree. This brings to an end my series of videos, 20 of them, based on my book. If you are grappling with Calvinism and finding it difficult to correlate with the message of the Bible, like I did for many years, and which motivated me to write this book, then perhaps this book is for you. And I would urge you to buy it and read it. I wrote this book not to make money. I will literally lose thousands of dollars in the process of having this book published. I'm not interested in making money, but I am interested in helping other people, Christians, who are struggling and being confused, like I was for many years, by this false system of salvation. Please share the message of this book with those who you think would benefit from its message. Thank you.